Good afternoon, and thank you for taking time out of your schedules to join today's webinar. My name is Kathy Robertson, and I'll be your host and your moderator for the next hour. So in today's session, we're going to be discussing quite a few topics, including the 2022 parcel environment, the latest carrier increases, new entrants in the market, and how you can start planning now to mitigate risk. But before we turn it over to our experts here, I want to remind our audience that we welcome your participation. So please submit your questions for our panelists in the GoToWebinar questions panel you see on the right-hand side of your screen. And we're going to take as many questions as possible at the conclusion of our presentation. And then we'll follow up directly on any questions that we can't get to in the within the hour. So that I'd like to introduce our panelists for today. First up, we have Matt Huckeba, Senior Vice President of Parcel Strategy and Chief of Staff. Matt, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself, please?
Absolutely. Thanks, Kathy, and thanks to everyone for joining us. Thrilled to be with this awesome group. So I actually got my start as an attorney and in the finance world, spent some time in technology and the startup world, and for the last dozen or so years, I've been in logistics and transportation. During that time, really focused on the parcel space, bringing in-depth knowledge of parcel delivery, parcel pricing, and how shippers can bring the most value back to their supply chain. It worked a lot on the consulting side of the business, as well as in audit and business intelligence technology. Thrilled to be here today. Thanks so much.
All right, great. And thank you. Thank you again for joining us. Robyn Meyer, Vice President of Parcel Solutions. Welcome. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, please?
Sure. Hi, Kathy. Hi, everyone. Robyn Meyer. I've been in the supply chain industry about 20 years. My roles are really mitigating risk and improving customer experience while gaining efficiencies. I've done that for those years really through the usage of technology, data, and different strategy points. So look forward to having this conversation today.
Thank you so much. And last but not least, hi, Todd. Thank you for joining us. I know you had to step away for a couple of minutes, but could you please tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Excuse me. I'm SVP of Parcel Solutions here at TI. This is my 36th year in small package. Started my career in the summer of '85 at United Parcel Service, and I left UPS in 2006 and came into the 3PL world. And I've been working with GI now ever since. And so I look forward to having discussions today in regards to the situation and capacity and the rate setting that's taking place right now.
Right. Yeah, definitely. That's going to be a great topic there. But so let's go ahead and get started. I hope everybody's buckled up and ready to go. We are going to start it off by taking just a few minutes to provide a brief overview of the current market. But the first thing that I'd like to touch on are the areas in which parcel shippers have been and will probably continue to struggle. So let's kick it off with a quick poll. Of these 5 areas, which is the greatest challenge for your business? We'll give you a few seconds here. But also, if you'd like to add any other challenges, feel free to do so in the chat box. Okay. We about ready for final results? Oh, yay. Okay. Yeah, I was chatting with everybody before the call, before this webinar started, that I bet it's going to be ports and airports that are showing a lot of the frustrations. And yes, definitely 35% of y'all have noted that. And yeah, I think today we're showing what, about 20 to 30 ships sitting outside of the port of LA and Long Beach. Slight improvement over the past few months or so, but yeah, a lot of ships are waiting to come into the port and to unload. And it's also occurring at airports as well. So don't think it's just the ports themselves, but a lot of shippers are bringing in a lot of inventory replenishment going into the retailer stores, the e-commerce network, manufacturing facilities, and so on. Next up was, okay, can you pull back up the results? No? Okay, if not, oh, thank you. So the next one was the capacity issue. And yeah, not a shocker. I'm sure as many of y'all are shippers have experienced this regardless of the mode of transportation. Ocean, air, truck, rail, all the way down to our friends in the parcel world. Following up by labor, yeah, we're all experiencing labor shortages, whether or not as drivers in the warehouse or what have you. And again, that brings up the whole warehouse issue. Warehouses are full. I think the Prologis CEO had said in their recent earnings not too long ago that they are fully booked in regards to their warehouses. They have run out of space in their facilities that are 100,000 square feet and higher. Super crazy. And wow, none of y'all have problems with returns? Okay. I'm sure that will pop up again come January after the holiday season. But really, Matt, Robyn, Todd, any comments here? Were you surprised?
Not really. Like you said, big focus on ports and airports. That's really one of the hottest topics in the supply chain, and is causing a crunch no matter what industry vertical these shippers are in. The warehousing space issue is definitely an interesting one, right? It's not only lack of capacity for these 100,000 and above needs, but also how can shippers, especially for retailers and e-commerce companies, start moving their warehousing facilities and distribution centers closer to their customers? Can we get into more metropolitan areas, and how do they start to solve those problems? Amazon already looking at abandoned shopping malls, and they've been using that strategy for over a year, but we're really going to have to start to look at other ways that unused facilities in cities can start to be utilized as warehousing space and distribution centers. And so that's a particularly interesting topic to me.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
One of the things I would say that is, I look at this too, is if you look at, just look at all of the different players within the commercial airline industry that have jumped into air freight, because the number one is the rates are through the roof. And so they're making money by not selling seats, but actually selling cargo space. And so there's some of the smaller commercial airliners had some very good financial numbers just because picking up some international lanes inbound to the United States and Europe from Asia.
Exactly. Okay, Robyn, why didn't anyone say returns?
Well, I think they chose the ones that were top of mind right now. Returns is definitely something that we're seeing quite a bit of concern around, as the e-commerce market expands. People are ordering multiple versions of the same product to see which one they like, and then struggling with the return process from the carrier and shipper perspective. So, managing those cost of returns, understanding which SKUs are being returned more often, then getting to the root cause of why that's occurring is something that we've been focused on a lot with our clients. So as well as the labor shortage, I mean, we're all pulling from the same pool, right? So understanding that FedEx, UPS, and the Postal Service just alone have come up with, 400,000 jobs they need, that's a big lift for anybody at this time of the year.
Exactly. All right, so that was a brief overview, very brief. So now that we've covered some of the major challenges that shippers have been facing and can expect to continue to face, let's talk about the carriers themselves. Most of the carriers have released their earnings reports. In fact, I think all of them have now. So let's talk about some of the key takeaways from these. And so let's start with our friends at UPS, and I'm going to bring Matt in on this. So Matt, UPS's quarterly earnings have been nothing short of spectacular for the past year and a half now. Revenues going through the roof, record profits. Why?
Yeah, great question. Nothing that we weren't expecting from this earnings report, and really continuing their trend of increased revenues and most importantly, increased profit. And they undertook about a year ago the better, not bigger strategy, and that's really paying off for them, right? They're selecting the type of volume and the amount of volume they want and is going to be most profitable for them. And like I said, that's really proven out. Their revenues are up just under 10% year over year now, despite about 3% volume declines in the US. So, they're making more money on smaller volumes, and that's because they're really effectively picking what volumes they want in the network. So strategy is proven out and is working great. I don't foresee that slowing down anytime soon. They're going to keep very actively managing their network, picking the customers they want, and even within the customers, the types of packages they want from them.
Yeah, one point on that, you think about it, it's 87 operating ratio they're running. It's the best ever. I've never seen it at that level. Normally they're running in the 91, 92 range. So it's unbelievable. It's impressive.
Yeah. I tell you, they have been extremely impressive. But meanwhile, our friends at FedEx took a bit of a stumble during this last quarter, and they came out and admitted that they're having a little bit of a labor shortage. And as a result, something like 600,000 packages a day are having to be rerouted among their facilities. Do you see them resolving this anytime soon, Matt?
I do. FedEx has a very active plan to get back, caught up to speed. Last year, as volumes increased through the start of the pandemic, FedEx, readily admitted they were about 5 years behind on their operating plan to support that level of volume. So they're working very quickly to get caught up. That is something that will be remedied in the future. But like you said, significant number of packages each day are being rerouted. Fixed within their network. They're using their monies now to build out the FedEx ground infrastructure to play catch up, like I meant, make sure they've got increased capacity. Also, they've seen a bit of a downturn in their residential volumes as well. So that's letting them hopefully take a breath, get caught up, and be ready for what's to come, and get back on plan.
Okay. And then of course we can't leave this discussion without mentioning quickly about the post office, and they are improving revenues, still reporting some losses, but they're going through a strategy change, which is really interesting. But that's really a whole webinar in unto itself. So with that, let's switch up here. So the general rate increases, they've been announced. And here are some of the rates that's been announced just within the past year. And this is just annual, but it's more than just annual, really. Right, Robyn?
Yeah, so if you take a look at this slide, this is just the changes in the carriers' ratings and pricing since COVID hit in March of 2020. So, we were kind of laughing about this the other day when this slide was created, saying, it's hard enough to manage your business when you're looking at an annual increase that at this point is typically looked at as, 5.9. But you really can't say it's 5.9 because, as we always say, a box isn't a box isn't a box, right? So what you're shipping, how you're shipping it, and where you're shipping it to is really, it's instrumental in knowing that specifically and being able to point your finger at how those rate increases and changes in the carrier structure are impacting you specifically as a shipper. I say it all the time, we can't move our customers. A lot of people wish they could, but it's not the way it works. So when you look at this program and what's occurred in the last 24 months, it's significant. And having the understanding of what these mean to you and how they impact your overall supply chain is huge.
Okay. So the 2022 general rate increases have been announced by FedEx and UPS. So let's take a little bit more deeper look into these. Todd, share with us in the next two slides what some of this means.
So one of the big things here I wanted to point out is so you get an idea of the evolution of the rate increase, right? So if you go in and you look prior to 2006, everything was basically under 4% rate increase, 3.6, 3.8%. And not until 2007, where you start to see both carriers institute the basically the formal program of passing a 4.9% rate increase all the way through 2021. So since 2007, we've had a 4.9% rate increase, except for 1 year with UPS in 2009, where they did classify it as a 5.9, but made adjustments in fuel. This year, both of them are doing a 5.9, and the adjustment in fuel is actually going to push this over. So November 1st, FedEx announced a change to the rate table effective. UPS announced the change for November 15th, which was Monday. Same idea, changing the rate table. So even though your transportation expense is pegged at 5.9, it's going to be higher than that because the rate table has changed. So now you're going to be well over 6% for both of them in relationship to your transportation expense. The other key here is that 5.9 does not reflect the surcharges and fees, the accessorials. This is they're on their own, but you can see that you just looking at the delivery area surcharge, which has been a increasing area. These are all double-digit increases for these surcharges and fees for basically, your rural, super rural type area outside the suburbs, and you're looking for additional charges to be tacked onto them. UPS announced they're going to go ahead and add a remote delivery. So there's, in essence, they're going to tag an additional 3,000 zip codes plus zip codes that are going to now be hit with a remote area surcharge. To give you an idea, in 2019, it was 24% of the population lived in a DAS area or a surcharged area for delivery. In 2022, it's 26. 2021 was 27.8. Now it's 28.3. So going into 2022, so more of the population is being pushed into what is considered a delivery area surcharge zip code. So that's just going to add, especially in the world that you heard talking about residential delivery from Matt. It has dropped for FedEx. But the point on that is it's substantially higher than it was in 2020 and 2019, where less than 50% of the deliveries were residential. Now you're over 57, you're in 57%. That means more and more of their deliveries are being tagged with these surcharges and fees, which is a reflection back to the consumer who's paying for that. Now, if you take a look at the next slide on international, international is starting to follow suit with all the additional handlings and oversize and residential surcharges in the world of international. And you can see here, all of them are pretty much double digit. And these double digit surcharges and fees are going to continue. The thing that you can see through this is the surcharges and fees and the demand charges are being accepted by the industry and absorbed by the industry. So this is going to be more and more common. The example, remote area delivery. Everyone thought, oh, well, it's DAS extended. Nope, we're going to hit you with 2022 remote. My point to that is there's going to be derivatives of each one of these additional. You got to go back to the days when additional handling was just one classification. Now it's dimensions, weight, packaging, and anything else that an auditor may classify as handling.
Wow. And to me, that whole additional handling is such a fuzzy surcharge unto itself. I never have been able to understand the nuances to that. It seems like it gets tacked on a little bit too liberally. So, Todd, quick question here. So, overall, on average, what is the real rate increase that shippers generally can expect?
If you're a commercial shipper, I'd plan for the 7 to 8% range. If you're a residential shipper, I'm going to go with most likely 9 and closing in on 10, just because of the impact of fuel, DAS, remote, all of those additional numbers are going to hit you.
Wow. Wow. So
it lends
Shipper,
itself to why you need experts to help you do this classification, because it's a lot of heavy lifting.
yeah.
Another good point there, Todd, is it's not just the change to the cost and the pricing on itself. It's policy changes that go along the addition of remote. 2 years ago, the change of what weight break and what classification fell into additional handling. So these are changes that happen, and many shippers aren't even aware of how that's going to impact them. Within the now 3 delivery area surcharge classifications, there's yearly shuffling around of what zip codes fall into each one. So you never really know how that's going to hit you without some added support, some expert analysis to help pave the way. Also, this is the annual increase announcement. We saw from that chart, it's very common now to have ongoing peak season announcements or additional surcharges that mean 7 to 8 to 10% today, could be something else 3 months from now.
Exactly. So let's switch up here. Now that we're all thoroughly depressed with the rate increases and capacity issues, need to strategize. I mean, we all need to strategize in order to keep businesses profitable as well as to keep the customers happy. So let's talk about some of the new entrants into the market that shippers may want to utilize in their carrier diversification strategy. Yeah, more options. Yeah, but which ones are going to work for you? That's a good question. So we categorized these new entrants into 4 categories, as you can tell, starting off with couriers and gig companies. These carriers are typically going to be handling small packages and that final mile. So I'm going to toss it over to Matt. Could you give us some background on these 2 types of carriers?
Yeah, absolutely. So, couriers have been a critical piece of that final mile delivery market for some time, but extremely niche. They had to really fit a very nuanced part of your overall delivery business. And so someone that had been there available, also, for a number of years, relatively low sophistication in terms of kind of the type of information you could get to really understand how you were going to be able to leverage them. What we've really seen over the last year or two is the boom in the gig companies. So these are organizations that really got their start in other areas of final mile, whether that be something like restaurant delivery, pharmacy delivery, groceries, and things like that. And so very natural spillover here was really entering formally into the supply chain and final mile delivery market a lot for e-commerce companies and retailers. So the big benefit for them is the technology capabilities. They had very refined technology to be able to support their network. They've continued to expand that now to support the final mile delivery options. So they give shippers the flexibility to offer same day delivery, many times same hour delivery of some of these critical items, or sometimes not so critical items, but that's up to the customer's perspective of how quickly they want to receive it. So between the gig companies and the couriers, they still fit a very niche marketplace, but it's one that is rapidly expanding as consumers are being more accustomed to say, I want it as quick as possible to my front door. The couriers now are also kind of leveraging this opportunity to improve their own technology, start offering similar data, similar analytics that the gig companies were equipped to do. So shippers can really start to understand, how can I effectively deploy these within my overall final mile supply chain? So we're seeing a lot of growth in this space as we move forward.
Yeah, definitely. So the next bubble here are retailers. Retailers are actually investing in delivery and logistics capabilities. Robyn, why are they doing this?
Yeah, so from a perspective of, we've seen over the last few years, retailers start to invest. You've seen Target look at localized delivery through Shipt. Walmart's come out with Go Local. There's a lot of opportunities. And just recently, we've seen a huge influx of retailers that have gone and bought logistics companies. So from a perspective of, retailers being in the market and being able to drive their own fulfillment and their own delivery aspect has become a very significant change in where the market is going. And, I get asked a lot, why would a retailer go out and buy a logistics company? And you really have to look at it for a couple different reasons. One, they've got guaranteed delivery by doing that, right? But the other piece is they can leverage some of their distribution centers, their warehouses. You all mentioned warehouse space as a challenge, right? They can look at leveraging that, fulfilling some of the other customers that they're actually servicing from a logistics standpoint, and making some of that labor, real estate cost, tax cost, et cetera, back. But I think the big important thing to look at from an aspect of these different opportunities is really how do you drive visibility across all of these? And I'm adding this as I go. But, when you look at the visibility, Matt talked about the technology that couriers and gig companies have. The retailers are investing in that technology as well, but each of those really manifest and manage their technology in silos. So having the visibility to all of those bubbles, along with the regional carriers, which we're going to talk about in a second, is going to be a game changer for individuals that have that. And that's where that focus is going to be very necessary. So you really understand, I'm leveraging all of these different carriers and all of these different options, right? But how am I doing so efficiently and cost effectively? And then more importantly, what's the customer experience?
Definitely. Yeah. And like you said, the regionals. So we've got the regionals and we have the super regional carriers. Todd, real quickly, can you give us some background here and cover how a shipper might want to utilize these regionals in their carrier mix?
Sure, exactly. Some of the regionals, are well established, been out there for 40 years. And have been in this and been basically niche players in their local territories and been delivering for a fixed group of customers to provide them additional service and capacity and flexibility that the nationals weren't able to provide. Now, let's go forward and take a look. In 2010, they started to get a good grip and move forward. And you start to see the world advance with many options in the areas in the United States, to the point now that about over 75% of the population is touched by regional carriers. In doing that, now let's say we're into the pandemic, the COVID, they're now, their volume has increased into where it's double digits. And now they're becoming a real player in the market of small package for more than just a select group of customers. It is a more viable solution for many different customers who in the past didn't have the capabilities or the technology to look at onboarding a regional carrier. And what both Matt and Robyn have spoken about with technology, they have advanced greatly, been able to start to do their own APIs. And that has allowed them to really become deeper involved with customers and provide more up-to-date type of delivery information. But the other thing it's done now is we've just seen the advancement of super regionals. You've got LaserShip buying OnTrack, and now you're going to see that basically that merger take place to where you're having West Coast and East Coast delivery from one carrier that can now help provide that for one customer. If you've got a distribution in New Jersey, you can get the continued service you got from LaserShip on the East Coast. But now in 2022, you're going to start to be able to tap into your customers on the West Coast using what now becomes a super regional. And we're going to see that continue and advance in the future rapidly.
Okay, great. So you mentioned diversification. So let's talk more about that. So Matt, can you give us your main point here, your main reason, why is it important for shippers to diversify their carrier mix?
So you look at the first bullet there, capacity is the biggest issue that we've got facing us today and into the future. We've talked about it a number of times, value over volume, better, not bigger. The larger national carriers are focusing on this as their strategy or just facing capacity concerns of their own. So you have to be creative in looking at your final mile supply chain. You have to think what options are available to me, but also how do I access these options? So, we've talked about it a number of times. Technology is key for the shippers as well. Oftentimes it's difficult to roadmap being able to build in half a dozen new carriers into their capabilities. So critically important to be able to do that in an efficient manner. And I'm thrilled that Transportation Insight is at the forefront of solving this capacity issue through technology. So working with shippers to integrate them on the front end with a variety of carriers, start to be able to operationally access these carriers as well. And so it's going to solve a big problem that shippers have. Like, how do I really solve the capacity issue? How do I really diversify? We'll get them leaps and bounds ahead.
Gotcha. Okay, Todd, what about the cost?
Well, the beautiful thing about where we're going with this is even though the large nationals are moving 40 million packages a day, if you look at it in this direction, I mean, where they come in and where they're going to be extremely successful is looking at having a very narrow service offering that can focus and be flexible with their customers, meaning the customer only can, basically is buying what they're looking at. There's not a lot of surcharges, not a lot of fees, and pricing is very competitive in the world of the regional carrier when you run up against the national side of it because of all the surcharges and fees that are tagged onto it.
But there are specific points, Todd, you just said, the narrow area, right? So there's specific points where there's narrow areas that those regionals cover. Now it's growing and expanding every day, but from an area and a service aspect, understanding which of the carriers are better at what areas, which ones offer service in those areas, right? And then what their strengths and weaknesses are. So contingency planning, that's the next thing, is huge because you have to understand what are the benefits and what are the weaknesses of some of these organizations. I mean, there's 130 plus of them now that you can look at, right? I mean, I remember when I started in this industry, I mean, there were 4. And so it's grown so much in that time frame that really understanding that, yeah, you can pick up the phone and call a regional or a gig operator or anything of that sort and say, hey, can you service me? But do you really know if they can service you to the expectation that you've put in place to your customer? And so having a contingency plan, but also understanding how those regionals work and that contingency plan works is important.
Great point. Thanks, Robyn. So at this point, we've covered the current shipping environment, the GRIs, and the new entrants. So with the volatile market that shippers are faced with, let's discuss how shippers can prepare for 2022. So first thing, of course, equip yourself with knowledge. And Todd, I'm going to toss this one over to you, let you talk a little bit more about this.
So this is where it becomes so much complex than it ever was. I make the mention about 2006 and the rate increase. In those days, it was much easier to look at a rate chart from a FedEx and a UPS and do some analytics around it. In today's world, it has gotten so complex. You have to always remember, none of the rate cards are linear. So it's always very difficult, and there's so many different nuances of when it's triggered. Like we just said earlier, you got DAS, extended DAS, now you got remote. You have to be able to take all of this into account when you're laying out your budget, especially when you're going in and not understanding where these all are going to be hit, because some of them are new. And that's one of the things when we're working with our customers, we're trying to help them lay out their budget for the next year and figure out how we can dodge some of these. Because the way I'm going to just give you real quick, I'm going to say that a commercial shipper for 2022 is probably going to be in that 7 to 8 range when you're all fully loaded in. And you're going to be in that 9 to 10 range when you're looking at a residential shipper. And that's just what we feel and understand right now without seeing an unknown iceberg that may be out there.
Okay, great. So jumping off from that point, we're also recommending that we utilize proactive business intelligence. Robyn, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, the days of being reactive and looking at data that's 5 to 11 days old off of a carrier invoice, you're not going to be able to do much that's going to impact your overall supply chain. You can obviously report on it, but reporting on it's no longer the gold standard, right? You want to be able to recognize and understand the options and the exceptions much more quickly. So having visibility into the carrier network, at a 15-minute increment, and understanding, where your exceptions lie, how the carriers are performing, those types of information are singularly needed by shippers in order to make those changes. So for example, we had a client they're opening several stores a week from a growth perspective, and understanding how the carriers are performing in those areas of the market allows them to actually be able to place the delivery orders for those inventory items, quicker and more efficiently, knowing which service level they need to choose, but then also being able to understand when exceptions are occurring, getting that kind of reporting. So using proactive business intelligence is significantly going to improve your overall capability, as well as, your customer expectation. And just add in the GRIs, we laugh about, how many different areas there are that impact, but understanding that to the penny and knowing how that's going to impact you based on how you ship and where you ship is extremely important.
Okay, great, thanks. And last but not least, versatile. Be versatile in 2022. Matt, can you expand on that for us?
Definitely. So, I really see this as kind of a three-legged stool of things that you need to do to really be prepared holistically for the next year. And so you've got the knowledge, you understand the impact of what these changes are doing, you understand your network and supply chain in a very proactive manner and have visibility to that through proper business intelligence. You've got to be versatile, and it won't surprise you to hear me say carrier diversification is going to be key to being able to be versatile in 2022. We now know the number of carrier options that are out there. We can identify who may be a fit. The biggest piece to me is who is going to be, from an operations standpoint and from an IT or technology standpoint, the most viable to use. So one of the biggest issues we hear from a lot of shippers is I don't have the IT bandwidth to stand up one new carrier, much less 6 or 7, to properly diversify my supply chain. So again, Transportation Insight is thrilled to be on the forefront of rolling out technology, bringing technology to market that can help do that, either identify where capacity is available or properly allow shippers to connect with all of these final mile delivery providers to holistically build out their carrier network moving forward. So I think we're solving a much needed problem in this third layer of being versatile, not just for 2022, but the landscape of final mile delivery really is changed now for the future. And so it's something that's going to be a need for some time to come.
Well, and as more and more shippers diversify, the technology is definitely important. Understanding, like we talked about, the characteristics and the strengths and weaknesses of those carriers, and then also, the time, Matt mentioned the IT bandwidth, and that's a lot of time due to resources, right? Same goes for the supply chain bandwidth. I can't tell you the number of times I get on calls with clients and prospects, and they say, I just don't have the time to dig into these dashboards, to dig into these things. And so really having the ability to get that proactively shared with you on a regular cadence is significantly important. And so from a client perspective, not only can you look at, let's diversify our carrier network, let's look at, 16 carriers, drill it down to 6. We did that for a client recently. What's more important to you? Is it time in transit? Is it cost? But then also on the back end of that, how are you leveraging that technology to minimize your need from a job perspective, right? We want to make it super simple on you, that it's going to show up in your inbox if there's an exception. And if not, you keep doing the other part of your day job, right? And that's where we come in as a resource to help with that too.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you to all three of you. Really appreciate it. Robyn, Matt, Todd, great tips, great feedback. So let's open it up for Q&A here. Any questions, please just put it in the chat box and we'll answer them. We've got a few minutes here. So wait a couple of seconds here.
Kathy, I have an unplanned question. I actually got a text. Can I go ahead and ask a question? So I got a text, and the question is specifically for Todd. It says, in terms of locations, I have 2 distribution centers, but based on the overall changes in the remote DAS you all have talked so much about, are 2 DCs where I want to go? What are you telling singular and double DC clients today?
Well, I think it has to do, it's a good question, because one of the things that you have to look at is what is your position for example, your SLA that you're trying to commit to your customer. And that's going to dictate quite a bit. It also means if you have 2 distribution centers, are you mirroring the inventory in both of them or not? Because if you're not, it can let's look at maybe one viable location that has to be within for the time in transit to your customers. Because if you position your distribution center correctly, one distribution center can hit, over 80% of the population in 3 days by ground. And that's in this day and age, that's respectable. It's very cost effective. And the other thing that you can start to look at is, establishing your own line haul and dropping into regional carriers to help jump that time in transit window, help lower your expenses because you'll have more control of your inventory, be able to build the direct load, and then be able to provide seamless tracking information because of the technology that exists today that didn't exist in the past. That you're going to have before, when it went into a line haul, you lose it, you never see it. Now you're going to have the capability of seeing it as it moves all the way to the end carrier, so your customer never loses visibility. That's a big point of making you think differently than you had to in the past when you're looking at multiple distributions. My point at the end of it is, it's worth taking a look at, because I'm a big proponent, as an engineer for UPS, and it's always about, you run the numbers, you run the simulation, and you figure out what's going to be the next best steps.
Well, and from a perspective of solution, even if you only have 1 or 2 DCs, some of the solutions that Matt has talked a little bit about will lend itself right to that, right? So being able to leverage multiple carriers through a single point of access, you no longer just have 1 to 2 DCs. You do have 1 to 2 DCs, but you have a footprint that's much larger. So, doing that analysis that Todd just mentioned, as well as leveraging some of the resources and technologies Matt's talked about, that's a significant improvement over where you'd be as a 1 or 2 DC shop a couple of years ago. So
yeah.
he says
I think it all starts with the priorities, like you mentioned as well, Robyn. It's, are your priorities cost? Is it, SLAs and delivery timelines to customers or commitments you've made? And we can also leverage some other technology that TI partners with a number of organizations on to understand from your distribution centers, what are your product level margins and how is that factoring in? What's the performance out of distribution centers? Because all the carriers will tell you they're not as effective in all regions of the country as they are in some of the others. So you really need to critically look at that as a piece of the puzzle too.
Okay, great. That's great.
Sorry, Kathy.
Oh, no, this is great. I mean, sharing the knowledge here is fantastic. I too have a couple of text messages with questions. So the first one is, what are the chances the peak now demand surcharge does not become permanent, like the temporary fuel surcharges in 2001?
So here's my thought on that, is that so the increases this year for 2022 are definitely above and beyond the norm. And in doing so, the positioning, I see that there's going to be a rollback. So as we come to the point where the United States and really the world has come to live with COVID, and we are now functioning like a society, and we get back into going to the stores, we get back into going out to dinner and all that good stuff, and we start to get our normal day and our lives back, what I anticipate with that is they're going to pull that peak demand or COVID surcharge, because now all customers are calling it COVID, right? Not a peak because it's year round. So I see that being pulled back. What I don't see being pulled back in the near future is the Christmas, what our traditional 6 weeks of traditional peak season. They've seen that has been absorbed. They've gotten a taste of it. And so they're going to probably continue with that. I can just give you an idea. Back in the 90s, we looked at when I was at UPS, and we looked at it because you have to remember we had a lot of capacity in the network in those days. And so we were able to accept peak, but even peak pushed us over the limit. We would be running these buildings at max capacity and plus, 5 to 10%, like you see in Star Trek, give me 105% on the reactor. Well, that's what these buildings would run at. And now most of these buildings are going to a automated facility. UPS is now, they said they're over 85% automation. And we know that FedEx is in the 96% range. These buildings have a max floor. They cannot go over their process rate. Why in the olden days, you could just staff the building with more people and push it through and catch it on the other end. And this way, you can't do that anymore because the technology has limitations. So what that means is that their ability to have excess capacity is limited, and they're going to always be closer to max than not to max. They don't want to overbuild, right? And they don't want to underbuild.
Yeah, I've got maybe a slightly different perspective. I think, like you said, once the customer base has gotten conditioned to this, like the peak season surcharge, like the fuel charges that were mentioned in your text, I think that the carriers will find a way to keep embedding these. So you mentioned even it went from called peak, and it was COVID related, and now it's demand pricing. If anyone's taken an Uber at the wrong time of day lately, they have demand or surge pricing built in so that they can, match up how many cars are needed with, how many drivers there are in the area. So I think some component of that, even if they kind of take away this regular announcement and calling it what they're calling it now, that's in the profit model at this point too, like you said. So they've got the taste of it. It's proving out in everyone's earnings report. So I think they'll find a way, and it may be something very similar to a surge pricing model where they bucket it off in 2 or 4 6-week periods along the way, and we'll see more frequent pricing fluctuations throughout the year.
Yeah. Okay. Got another question for y'all. If your business is not located directly within some of these parcel carriers' footprint, is there a way to utilize their service still?
Yeah.
It's becoming, yes. You want to go ahead and take that, Matt? Go right ahead.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, there absolutely is a way. Todd touched on it some before, is how can you inject packages directly into the region, when you're out of region, right? It's utilizing technology like TI is bringing to market to do that. But it's not just about how do you get the packages there. Todd said, at some point, if you just hand it off and trust that it's going to get there and have no visibility through the process, that doesn't work for you as the shipper, and it won't work for the customer as well. So you have to have a way, and these options are coming out in the marketplace now, but have a way to have end-to-end visibility, understand how the loads get built and what goes to which of the regions and which providers. So big solve for that issue on the technology front for sure. And I think it's very usable for 1 DC, 2 DC locations to be much more diversified.
Okay. And just to add on to that, I think that in 2022, we're going to see a lot more of that. And to what Matt had stated earlier, we're working on that solution right now at TI to be able to bring that to the forefront for our customers in this exact situation where they may not have the capacity, or I should say the volume, to build direct. We have a solution for them that can get they're basically open up the ability to utilize a regional.
Okay. All right, we've got quite a few more questions here. I'm not sure we're going to be able to get to all of them, but let's work our way through here. Do you see e-tailers offering free shipping or incentives for bundling or consolidating versus one-off as potential mitigation of freight increases by monopolies?
I do, because I think what you're going to see is the access point utilization. UPS calls it access point, driving that. So this, who did this really well was the USPS, right?
Yeah.
How many neighborhoods that are being built today do you see the mailbox on the porch? It's all in clusters, right? So the mail person goes to the cluster and delivers the whole neighborhood. Well, that's the same logic and the same design of the quote access point that the carriers are trying to utilize. And what they're tapping into is the large retailers to use some of their storefront for that particular situation. So you can see it's a joint work share operation driving not only the end user to the store to pick up their package instead of the carrier going to the house, but then potentially having that particular individual walk down a aisle and grab something on the way out. So I think that is a big driver.
Yeah, and one of the things that we've been working a lot on, Kathy, from an analysis standpoint and looking at, some of the profitability and density within the technologies is, you see a lot of shippers leveraging stores as fulfillment centers, right? It helps with the capacity challenges in some aspects if they're looking at, DC pickup versus store pickup in terms of, I'm at a limit here with my FedEx or my UPS carrier. But also we're seeing a lot more clients that are saying, hey, if I actually work with another organization right down the street from me and we can consolidate those packages and get them picked up and delivered, is it more beneficial to the carriers or more beneficial to us from a price or service standpoint? So we're helping a lot of customers look at that as an option as well and connecting those individuals to get that done. But then on the backside of it, also looking at the historical information and the cost for the shipping, the cost for the product, and driving, are your SKUs profitable and which areas of the country are more profitable for you, and how do we focus on those ones that aren't, right? And so driving your behavior, you can do, like I said, you can't move your customer, but you can drive behavior. So driving that behavior, even to the point of if they're showing up at an access point, we're communicating with them proactively. Your package has arrived at the access point. You haven't picked up the package yet. Go get it. And then finally the customer themselves calling if the consumer still hasn't picked up the package after 2 days. So there's some options there that can help drive that as well.
Okay. We have time for one more question. And I think this is a really important question, particularly as the USPS evolves into something we're not quite sure of at the moment. But what about the small shipper? Are there any options for the small shipper? We've talked about the high costs, the GRIs, the costs are just climbing. Are small shippers getting left out?
Well, this is where the USPS can step up and really support that industry, not only on the aspect of the pickup, but also being able to deliver for their customers throughout the U.S. They have different pricing structures and models, and they are for the right type of package, which is going to be a residential delivery, lightweight. That particular package fits that network very successfully. They do offer pickup right at the business or the home business, and then delivery throughout the United States, and the ability to use their technology platform by creating your own account and logging in. There's a point that will start to switch, and it really is that when you start to push past $50,000 to $100,000 a year, then there's more options in looking at what your capabilities are, and that really falls into the reseller market that's available out there for that model of customers. So the beautiful thing about the evolution of a shipper or company is as they evolve, all of those different doors open up, and then they have an all new horizon to look at. you start out small and then you work your way up. It's still in that situation. I do go back to Matt's point about the gig economy and these carriers such as Rhodey and so forth. That type of industry, local delivery may become more of an option for that type of business in the future. It's not quite there yet, but I can see that there may be evolution around that for local type delivery.
Okay.
40 miles away.
Okay. Well, Robyn, Matt, Todd, thank you so much for all your insights for today. That pretty much wraps up our Q&A. I would like to thank everybody for joining us, and stay tuned on our social media channels. We'll have a recording of this session coming out. Also, please be sure to visit our website for our latest white paper on the small parcel outlook for first quarter next year. And again, please contact any of our panelists or me if you have any further questions. Thank you so much.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Thanks, Kathy. Thanks, everyone.
Yep.